Hi, everyone. This is Lisa Harlock. We're just opening up the webinar now, getting everything shared out, and we'll begin at 2 o'clock. All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lisa Harlock, and thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to be going over our forum webinar training for the Administrative Walkthrough Part 1. So let's go ahead and get started. So today, like I said, my name is Lisa Harlock. I'm a project manager here at AgileQuest, and I'll be leading the training today. We also have on the line Vashonda Short, who's another one of my fellow project managers, and she'll be assisting us today in questions and comments. So for today's agenda, we'll be covering the Administrative Walkthrough Part 1. We'll be learning to do things such as, but not limited to, add and configure locations, add and configure assets. We'll be talking about the forum homepage, and we'll be going through a simple reservation demo. This session is going to be recorded and also posted to our customer success portal, the URL here below at success.agilequest.com. If you have any trouble accessing, you can always let support@agilequest.com know, and we'll go ahead and take care of that for you. We'll also be taking questions today. So the format will be, we'll be going through the training till at least 2:45, and we'll be stopping for 15 minutes for the questions. If you have any questions, you can easily submit that through GoToTraining webinar. So you should have a GoToTraining webinar console that you use to access this webinar, and there's going to be a section, for questions. Also, just a reminder that the next forum administrative walkthrough part 2 is scheduled for next week. LaShawn has gone ahead and shared in the chat box the registration link, and everyone will also receive a follow-up email today with the registration link also. So part 2 of the forum admin training will continue our admin walkthrough, but also include groups and permissions, users, the general tab, and we'll also be talking about the data management utility, which is our bulk loader, where you can bulk add, modify, and delete things like locations, assets, and users. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started here with Forum. So for those of you who are new to Forum or are already existing Forum clients, we log in the same way if we're using the regular Forum login. So this is not how you would log in with SAML, but you can access Forum at any time by going to login.agilequest.com. The next step you'll be taking is logging in with the email address and password that you set up upon creation of your user account. If you're new to Forum or you don't have a Forum yet, your forum will be created and your initial administrator will add you to the forum. You'll receive a welcome email, which will allow you to go ahead and set your password inside a forum. If at any time you need to reset your forum account password, so this does not include SAML, you'll click on the Forgot Password link to be able to reset your password at any time. So let's go ahead and log into Forum. So we're going to start today's training off with talking about the home page of Forum. Now this demonstration as well as walkthrough is targeted at administrators. So we're going to start with the home page, which administrators and end users can see. And then we'll begin talking about what sets you apart as an administrator of Forum. So after you log into Forum, the first thing that you're going to notice is a background and a motto. So for those of you who are new to Forum that don't know, or those of you who already have a Forum, we can assist you with setting up a background image, which can scroll, as you see here. And we can also change the motto. So the motto, AgileQuest Forum, love where you work, can be configured to say something different, or we can even remove it if you have an image that you don't want to obstruct. Below this, you will notice the reservations bar. Now we're going to come back to the reservations bar after we've gone ahead and set up a location as well as an asset. So just put a tab in that one. But next we're going to talk about the 3 sections below the reservations bar. The first one is the upcoming reservations section. This will show the user, whether they're an administrator or not, any upcoming reservations they have. It will show the 3 reservations they have coming up soonest. And if it's the day of and your asset is configured to allow check-in, the user will have the option to check in the day of their reservation. They'll also have the option to cancel. If the user would like to see more information about the reservations, they can click on the View Reservations button here. We'll be talking about this more in part 2 of the session when we talk about users. Below this section is the Recent Reservations section. This shows recently completed reservations and provides the user with the option to copy that reservation. This gives the user a shortcut to be able to recreate a reservation that they might have liked on the fly. Below this is the My Team section. This is where the user can add other users in Forum to their team. So this is just one of the many ways that a user can find another user inside of Forum. So for example, people that are on my team here, I can quickly see, for example, Jessica, I can see that she has a reservation at 2 o'clock in meeting space 2. Now where this brings value to your end users is if they have a team that they frequently work with, they can scroll to the bottom of their home page after they log in to see where those other users are. And that can help influence where they choose to sit that day. So for example, if I have some work that I need to do with Jessica that day, I might actually choose a space right beside meeting space 2 if it's available, so that I can confer with Jessica and work on the items that we need. Now, what if I need to locate a user that's not necessarily on my team? If I scroll back up the home page, you may have noticed the search for person bar here. So let's say that mail got incorrectly delivered to my desk and I'd like to drop it off for Torrance. I can search for Torrance here. I can find Torrance and hover over his name to get more information. And I can also click View. And this will show me that he has a reservation in the Boston office 11. So this is easy for me then. I can walk over to his desk, drop off the mail, or if I have a question, I can ask him a question as well. You can modify this search as well. So if you'd like to see if he has a reservation tomorrow, for example, you can do that as well. And here I can see he has a reservation tomorrow in the same spot. So those are two ways that a user can find another user inside a forum. But now what we can do is start talking about what sets you apart as an administrator in Forum. So that would be the Settings tab here. The Settings tab will take us to the configuration pages of Forum. An end user will not be able to see the Settings tab. We'll talk more about user role and rights in the second session next week in part 2. So if I click on the Settings tab here, this brings me to the configuration pages for Forum. So what we're going to be primarily focusing on today is locations and assets. So I'm going to go ahead and click on locations. So when I click on locations, I can see all of the data that's already inside of this particular forum. But the navigation works very similarly between all the tabs. To the right, you're going to have a table of information that will show you what's in the system already. And to the left, navigatable tabs. So when we're setting up a new forum or we're setting up a new building, the first thing that we want to do is create a new location. So I'll be clicking on one of these and walking through the configuration options. But something to keep in mind is Forum is somewhat like a nesting doll. To be able to have a workspace that's reservable for another user, it needs to have a home first. So let's talk about its home. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Boston office. And we're just going to pretend that this is a brand new location and I'm setting up the configuration options. So the first page that I am brought to is the details page. The required information to add a new location is marked by a blue asterisk here, and that is location name, which can be anything you want, but something unique, followed by address. Now, a little tip on address. When you're entering this in, you have to choose from one of the drop-down tabs. And this is because we integrate with Google Maps. So we're looking for an address that is recognized by Google. If the address is not recognized by Google, you'll have trouble adding it. So if you have any trouble with that, please reach out and let us know. But once we've clicked on this, Google Maps will be integrated and we can see to the right where this particular location is located geographically. This is also really handy when a user is using our mobile app, as they'll be able to go ahead and click on that address within the mobile app and use whatever navigation application they prefer to use. Next is location type. This doesn't influence any behavior of the location inside a forum, but it helps us classify what that location is. So you can choose from any one of our canned types here. The time zone will automatically be configured based on the address of the location. So as you can see, this is Eastern time. And next we have the concept of active and inactive in forum. So I'll talk about that for just a moment, as active and inactive flows through nearly all the tabs. So we're going to be retouching on this with assets as well as with users. The easiest thing to think about when you're thinking about active and inactive inside a forum is anything that's active can have actions taken upon it. So if it's an active location, users will be able to see it and make reservations inside of it. If a location is inactive, no one will be able to see it if they're an end user, but administrators will. So again, active items can have actions taken upon it. Inactive items cannot have actions taken upon it by end users, but will be able to be seen by administrators. Another scenario for this would be, let's say that you're already live with Forum and you have multiple locations, but you're bringing on a new building. It may be easier for you to go ahead and begin building this new building, leave it inactive so that you can work on your configurations without worry of end users getting confused by seeing the new location too early. And then when you're ready, you can flip it to active and users can begin making their reservations. Below this, we also have an optional description box. So this description box can be seen by end users, and it can include information about this particular location. So it could include things like, where's the best place to park? Maybe there is a great place to go for lunch that you guys prefer, or even historical information about this particular location. You could put in a link to a wiki article about the building. All right, so that is the details page of locations. Next, we're going to be walking through all of these navigatable tabs to the left to talk about the different configuration options that you have. I do want to note before I get too far ahead of myself as well, you notice some things are grayed out and italicized. This isn't because you don't have access to them. They're items that are coming soon. So you can think of it as a preview. So the next thing I'll be talking about here is floor and floor plans. This is where you can actually add in the different floors and floor plans of your building. Best practice would be to add your floors prior to adding your reservable assets. So an asset in Forum is anything that can be reserved, whether that's a workspace, a conference room, a flip chart, even a room setup service. You're going to want to have your floors in first, and we will see why in just a moment when we get to assets. But here's where you can add your floors. And just a quick tip for those of you who already have Forum, you can actually drag and drop these to affect the display order in which users see them. And this is also where you could come to add a floor plan. So if I'd like to add a floor plan to this particular location that I may not have yet, or if I'd like to replace an existing, I can click the X to delete my floor plan if it's existing. And just a word of caution here, if you already have a floor plan that you've set up with hotspots, if you click the X, that will delete the floor plan and that does delete the hotspots. So just be careful when you're using that option. And next, you'll be able to also add a floor plan here. So to add a new floor plan, all I would need to do is click the little plus button here. And this will pop me to my File Explorer, where I can then browse to find any example floor plan here and upload. That's all there is to it. When it comes to floor plans, we can upload image files. So that would be, for example, a JPEG image, perhaps a GIF. However, we don't support PDFs or CAD files. If you'd like to learn more about this, we do have an image Forum guidelines item on our Success portal that you can work with. All right, so I'm just gonna keep this and save. Alrighty. Next is location of assets. So if you're familiar with Forum or you're familiar with any of our other products, you may have heard of us talking about hotspotting. So if I click on floor plan location of assets, this is where I can create hotspots. This is where, if I choose a floor, I am able to decide where a particular asset shows for my users on the visual floor plan view. When we get through walking through a simple reservation demonstration, we'll be able to see this from the standpoint of a user. But for now, just keep in mind that after we create an asset, we're actually able to display it in a visual way on a floor plan. All right, so we'll come back to hotspotting once we've created an asset. Scrolling back up, the next section is photos. So for locations, you can add up to 6 photos that you'd like to display. The end user can see this when they're searching for a reservation by location rather than asset. They can also see this by hovering over the name of the particular building to see more information about it. To add a photo to a location, really simple. Click the Add Photo button, browse to the photo you'd like to upload, and click Open. Now, a little pro tip here as well. We all know that Phones in particular, a lot of our devices have great cameras on them. So if you don't have professional photos taken already, or you'd like to take some new ones, Forum is a dynamic website. And what I mean by that is you can actually open Forum on your device, such as a mobile phone, maybe an iPad in the browser, log in, and the website will actually resize to the size of the screen that you're using. Now, this is really great, and where I'm going with this is, I was able, for example, at the AgileQuest headquarters, to walk around the building, take pictures of the building, take pictures of the workspace, and because I was logged in directly on my phone to the Forum, I'm able to upload directly from my phone. This is a time saver. Instead of having to take the picture, upload it to my laptop, sign into Forum, and then upload, it kind of saves me a step because I'll be directly uploading from my phone. It's a little time saver there. Alrighty, and if you'd like a particular picture to show up first when a user is taking a look, you can just click the little blue star. Alrighty. Next is contacts. Contacts in Forum allow a user a contact at the particular building that they're making a reservation in. So, for example, after you make a reservation inside of Forum, you will receive a confirmation email. That confirmation email will have information about your reservation, but at the bottom of the email, there will also be a listing for contacts. So best practice would be to add someone here who is able to answer questions for users that may not be covered by Forum. So for example, if a user needs to know, well, is this the best place to park around the corner? Or I really am looking for a great place to take my client to lunch. They need a contact that they can ask those things of. So best practice would be to have here, for example, a floor manager, maybe a building manager, someone that knows about the space and the area around the space so that they can best advise users. To add a user to a contact, you can just click Add User. You can find them by location, for example, and search. Let's try another location here. So let's try the Boston office. Let's say I'd like to add Chauncey as a contact. I can check him off and apply. And then when users are making reservations, they'll be able to see his email address information, no phone numbers, so you don't have to worry about spam, and ask questions as needed. Alrighty. Next is associated assets. So in Forum, there are a number of ways to find out information about the spaces that are attached to a particular location. So again, I'm referring to assets, those reservable items in Forum. So here under associated assets, I can see all of the assets that are attached to the Boston office. I'm also able to filter these if I'd like to, by floor, maybe by category. And if I choose a category, I can even drill down to the type, or I can search by name. So this allows you to be able to quickly find an asset, but this isn't the only place that you can find this information out. We'll also take a look at that underneath of assets. Similarly, we can also see a list of reservations associated with this particular office as well. So by clicking on list of reservations, this brings up all the reservations given the time period here. So if I just wanted to see today, for example, I could shorten my time period, click apply and search. And this will show me all of the reservations associated with this particular location for the time period indicated. I can actually filter further. I can filter by the type of space. I can also filter by the reservation status. Now, this is a little bit more advanced for this session and something we'll be covering later under the reservation section in part 2 of these sessions. Now, I also want to note that when you're underneath of the location as the administrator, you won't be able to take actions upon these reservations like bumping or canceling. You would do that underneath the reservations tab. But for now, this is a quick way to see a list of reservations associated with this location. Next is archiving, and I always refer to archiving as the no-no button because it's very easy to remember when you think of the no-no button. So I always caution, if you see red text in Forum, take a moment and make sure you understand the information. If you were to archive a location, this would actually be deleting the location from Forum. It is an irreversible process, so just be sure before you perform an archive on a location, asset, or user before you do so. All right, so that is configuration for a location. If you have questions regarding the configuration of a location, please pop it into the question box for Vashonda, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the session. Next up, we're going to be going to assets and asset configuration. So to get to assets, I'm just going to click on the assets tab here. And next I'll be brought to the location where I can begin configuration of an asset. So you'll notice that this is blank right now. This is because Forum is looking for your filters. If you'd like to just see everything that happens to be in your Forum that is an asset, you can just hit search and it'll bring up everything. Now, after you've created assets inside of your Forum, you can also filter and drill down by location. So for example, if I'd like to see everything that is at Boston, maybe I'd like to see all of the workspaces, I can do so by filtering here. Now I can see all of the workspaces that are configured at Boston. So what we're going to do now is talk about the configuration options that you have for a particular asset. So I'm going to go ahead and actually click on Add an Asset so we can walk through how to configure something new. So for the purposes of today's demonstration, we're just going to call this a test workspace because that's exactly what it's going to be. So again, an asset is anything that's reservable inside of Forum, and we have several categories to help with this. Now, categories are going to affect how this particular asset behaves and will also affect the options that we have. So for example, a collaboration space, which is best used for things like conference rooms, a workspace, things like cubicles, office space, huddle space, and so on. Equipment, a flip chart, a projector. Services like catering, maybe room setup service. And parking, which I often see used for things like Employee of the Month or maybe expectant mother parking. So we have a lot of options of things that we can control and help users reserve. But for today, we're just going to use the workspace. Now, once I've selected the category, I can then drill down to the type. So here I can decide what type of workspace this is. And this will help my end user see what type of space they're getting themselves into for the day. End users will also be able to filter in their reservation searches by the type of space that it is. So for example, if they know that they're looking for a private office, they might filter their results by office private. Next, we'll be attaching to a location. Now, this is why it's important to have your floors already set up. So when you search, which by the way is currently a geographical search, we have a change upcoming in Forum in the next couple of weeks where you'll actually be able to search by the name of the building. But for now, just kind of a quick tip is you could search by state, zip code, or if you're like me and you're kind of lazy, I just put in US and it brings up everything in the United States. And now I can scroll down and find my Boston office, and here's where I can attach it to my floors. So if you don't have your floors created first, it actually causes a little bit more of an extra step because you'll eventually have to go back and attach it to a floor if you'd like to hotspot it. But for now, we'll go ahead and attach to the first floor. Now, if you use chargebacks in your organization, so some companies have it where different departments charge certain fees for other departments to use their space, for example, you could enter this here. For this example, we won't be using this, but if you do use it, you can enter it here. If you do not use it, the best practice would be to leave it at 0. Next, we will add it to an asset group. So every asset is required to be attached to an asset group. This is part of groups and permissions and how we drive user behavior and who may reserve what space or who may request to use a particular space. And that subject will be covered during our next session next week. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and search, and I'm just going to put it into the Boston Assets category. So for now, just keep in mind that asset groups are containers for assets, and we'll learn next time how to manipulate that. Now below this, we have again that item of active and inactive. If a workspace is inactive, no one will be able to reserve it, whereas if it's active, everyone can. So you'll notice that this changes at the bottom here. Active will be available versus inactive will not be available. All right, and now we're going to save. So next, we'll be walking through all of these navigatable links, just like we did with our location. So next is hours of operation, and this is step one in driving user behavior. So we can decide when a user may reserve this space. So our best practice suggestion would be, if your building is 24 hours, leave this at 24 hours. If it's not, for example, it's 8 to 5, best practice would be to mimic those hours as well. So let's say on Monday, it's only open from 8 to 5. I can uncheck 24 hours, come to Monday, click the time, and either by using these cute little carrots or highlighting, I can decide when it is open and when it is closed. And now, if a user comes in and tries to make a reservation starting at 6 p.m., this particular space won't be available for them to do so as it's closed. So that's one of the ways you can begin to control when users make reservations on this particular asset. Next is policies, and this is what we'll be spending the most time in assets today. Policies are considered a type of business rule, which really do help us drive user behavior. And let me also point out, because we're underneath of this particular asset, this test workspace, we are only affecting policies for this particular asset. There are ways to set policies for all assets at once, and we'll be covering that when we talk about our bulk loader, our data management utility, next time. So for now, we're just setting up a workspace manually and affecting the rules that apply to it only. So not every asset has to have the same rules. They all can have different rules. Best practice would be to be as consistent as possible just to make your life easier. Alrighty, so the first one to cover is maximum days in advance. And before I get there, actually, let me also point out, if you ever forget what a particular policy means, you can click on the blue information button to not only learn what this particular rule means, but also an example of how to use it. So the first one covered is maximum days in advance. This is the amount of time, or the maximum amount of time in advance a user can make a reservation. Since I've created this particular space manually, our defaults have already been filled in for us. So these are very easily changeable just by highlighting and typing in what we'd like. So let's say my users are allowed to make reservations 60 days in advance. I would do so here. So if a user then comes in and tries to make a reservation 90 days in advance on this particular space, they would not be allowed to. Next is cancellation lead time. Cancellation lead time does not impact user behavior in a way that does not allow them to cancel in advance, for example, as it might suggest. But this is a way to tell who your best users are. So for example, let's say that there's cancellation lead time on this particular space for 15 minutes. If a user cancels at least 15 minutes or more in advance, what will happen is in our reporting, we'll see where it's canceled within lead time. If it was canceled after this particular time period, we will see that it was canceled canceled outside of lead time. So this is a way in our reporting to tell the trends of the users. Paying attention to the different reporting after these policies are set up can help you assess later on if you need to change any policies, which is also entirely possible. So for example, if you notice that users are canceling last minute quite a bit, you might want to reassess what your policies are on this particular space. Next is lead time necessary for a reservation, and this does impact user behavior. So for example, using our 15 minutes again, if there's a 15-minute lead time necessary for a reservation, what this means is a user must reserve at least 15 minutes in advance on this space. So it's 2:30 now. If I was looking for a reservation starting at 2:35, in my search results, this space would not be available to me as a possible reservation because it requires at least 15 minutes of lead time for that reservation. This can be helpful if you're trying to mitigate users making last-minute reservations, for example. Next is setup time and breakdown time. Now, I don't commonly see this used on workspaces, so we'll use the example of a collaboration space, like a conference room. So we've all kind of had to deal with a really pesky projector, and so this actually really helps the user with things like that. So if this, for example, was a conference room and we wanted to give them a little bit of extra time to be able to set up and get ready for their meeting, you might want to consider setup time and breakdown time. So what this will do is it will add on 15 minutes to the start and end time of a reservation. So if my reservation starts at 3 o'clock and ends at 4, I'll really have the reservation starting at 2:45 and I'll have it to 4:15, allowing me to set up my projector and break it down. Next is minimum and maximum reservation duration. And you guessed, it's exactly what it sounds like. So you need to have at least 1 minute for a minimum reservation duration, but you could also require more time. So if this workspace was a little bit more high value, for example, you could require users use it for at least 60 minutes. Likewise, let's say that this is a touchdown space, and you want users to come in and use the space for 60 minutes and then move on to an office or maybe a cubicle. So I see this most used for touchdown spaces, for example. This would be a great way to limit a user's reservation, so they could only limit it to 60 minutes. Now, let's say that a user figures that out. So our policies are transparent. When we go through the reservations walkthrough, you'll be able to see the different configuration rules so the users can see that. Now, let's say that they're like, I need this space for 2 hours. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 back-to-back reservations. Well, we have a rule for that. So if, for example, you would not like a user to be able to make back-to-back reservations on this particular space, you could actually put into place our back-to-back reservations rule. So for example, you could require the user to wait 15 minutes between the reservations that they own on this space. And that would be a way to get around people trying to mitigate that maximum reservation duration. Alrighty. The next important thing to talk about on this page is requiring check-in and check-out. I would say this is probably the most important rule on this page because it helps us with a number of things. Firstly, it helps us with utilization, so we can see who is actually there. Requiring check-in and check-out requires the user on the day of their reservation to check in to their space. If they do not check in, they will be bumped. In other words, the workspace reservation will be canceled and freed for someone else to use. So this really helps out with your workspace utilization. Another example of this and where this would come in handy is, let's say that you've fallen ill for the day. The last thing on your mind when you're not feeling good is canceling your workspace reservation. So with check-in, check-out on, if you do not check in, your reservation space will be canceled and freed for someone else to use. So that's another way to use this. Now let's say that you'd like to give users a grace period. A great example of this is DC. We're close to DC. Traffic is terrible in DC. And depending on your city, it would be a really nice thing to give your users a little bit of a grace period for their check-in. So by using a grace period, what this means is, let's say that I have a workspace reservation at 8 a.m., but man, I hit traffic that day. With a grace period of 60 minutes, I'll have until 9 a.m. to go ahead and check into my workspace reservation. So that's a really nice feature to give your users. Now, if you don't want to use a grace period, auto bump kicks in. So you might be wondering about the difference here. So by requiring check-in and check-out and using a grace period, it means that your user has 60 minutes to be able to check into their reservation before the reservation is bumped. Now, if you don't use a grace period, so let's say that's 0, auto bump time kicks in. And what this means is, let's say that you have a reservation at 8 on this space, someone has a reservation as well in this space at 2. If the users have not checked into their space by 10 a.m., all reservations for that day will be bumped. So we see this used primarily in locations where there's a lot of competition for space. Alrighty, so that is configuration for an asset regarding policies. Moving on, we'll be talking about floor plan. So we had talked about the hotspotting earlier, and here is our floor plan. We can actually hotspot underneath of this particular asset itself. So if I'd like to hotspot this, I can highlight the workspace, click Add Shape to Floor Plan, and you will notice this little square up here, and I can then drag and drop onto the space where it lives. Now I can zoom in on the floor plan if it's a little small, I can use the hand to rearrange that a little bit there. I can change the transparency of the hotspot. So if you have a really nice floor plan, you might want that a little more transparent. And I can also drag this to resize. So I'll unclick the hand here, and now I can drag to resize to fit my image below. Now, if you're a little bit anal retentive like I am, you can actually even affect the XY axes here to make it just perfect. Now, I did note you can do this underneath of the asset itself, but my best practice suggestion would be to go ahead and do your hotspotting under the location. And the reason for that is when you're underneath of a particular asset, you'll only be able to see that particular asset's hotspot. You'll notice that all the other hotspots are missing. That's because we're just looking at this test workspace. So my best practice suggestion would be to hotspot under the Locations tab, simply because you'll be able to see where all the hotspots are in relative to your new workspace, for example. Alrighty. Next is the Details page. So beneath the Details page, we have some optional details we can also include to help the user understand what space they're getting for the day, and we can also help them filter. So for example, in the description, you might put your clean desk policy. In this case, I'm just going to put this is a test. And I can also include amenities and attributes that this particular asset may have and the user may sort by. So for example, I can include that this is a window. I can also include if it's an adjustable height desk, maybe my number of monitors, and save. And now the user will be able to find this space more easily by using the filters. So for example, if they really need a space with 4 monitors, they can filter by the number of monitors, and the search results will return those spaces that will achieve what they're looking for the day. And this is an optional page, so you do not have to do this if you do not want to. Likewise, photos are also optional. To add a photo to a workspace or conference room or any assets, you can just click Add Photo, browse to the photo you'd like to upload, click Open, and that will then be uploaded. You can add up to 6 of these. I'm going to add a couple more here. And if you have one that is your favorite, you can highlight this star here, and that will show up first in the search results. You can also provide a description if you'd like to. Now, I really like photos, and it's one of my favorite things to add to Forum because as a user, you might not know what a particular office or workspace is called. Maybe it's a 101, for example, but you may know what it looks like. So this is really helpful for ease of use as well as user adoption. Alrighty. Next is dynamic assets. So let's say that you have a conference room that has a bifold wall down the middle that can take one room and turn it into 2. We do have logic inside of Forum that will handle that for you. So if you need help with this, please let us know and we can walk you through. But essentially, you would be creating your mama room and the rooms that become its babies when it's separated. We would link these together inside of assets. That way, if someone reserved the mama room, the babies wouldn't be available. But if baby 1 was reserved, baby 2 is available, but not the mama room. So we have logic to hold on to all of this. Next is notifications. Notifications is really useful to kick off workflows. I really like it for that. So what notifications are used for is any time that someone makes either a request to use the space or a reservation on the space, someone can be notified. And that's extremely useful if you're setting up something like a service or maybe an equipment, or perhaps you're setting up, for example, a water service. You could add a user that exists inside of Forum. I'm going to go to Boston again, just search. And here I could add Chauncey. I'm picking on Chauncey today. So I can add Chauncey to the notifications for this particular workspace. And I can decide if he needs to know if someone makes a request to use this space following on our approvals workflow, or if they just want to know when someone makes a reservation. So perhaps someone's responsible for doing things like refilling waters, refilling snacks. This would be a really great way to notify them that, hey, there's going to be a reservation in this space, and that could help kick off a workflow. Or let's say that you're an EA or someone that has a stake in this particular space and you want to know what's going on there. This would be an easy and quick way to get notifications about reservations and requests on the space without having to log into Forum. Alrighty, so that is configuration of an asset. If you have any questions on that, please let us know and we'll get to as many as possible at the end of the session. So the last thing that we're going to be covering today is walking through a simple reservation. So as the admin, to get back to the home page at any time, all you would need to do is click the AgileQuest logo. And this will pop me right back to my Forum homepage. Now my preferences are already filled in, and that is my location preference and my workspace preference. We'll be learning how to set preferences in our next session. So what I'll be doing, let's say that this is not filled in, I'm a new user and my preferences are not set. To find the location I'd like to make a reservation in, I can use the state, the zip code, or the country like I like to use. I'm going to select the Boston office here, and I'm going to search for a workspace. Now, if I click this, I have other options that I can search for, like a collaboration space or an equipment. However, I do want to note, if you only have workspaces at your particular location, only workspaces will be available to the user. So it won't display equipment, service, or parking, for example, if it's not currently in use. Next, I'll select my date start time. So if I click this here, I can affect my start time. I can go to 3 o'clock. I can also highlight this, put in the time I want it to start, or back it up with the carrots. We'll start it at 3 and click apply. And next I can change my end time. So if it automatically will default to an hour, but if I need it a little bit longer, I could type in 15, for example, or I could use the carrots to back it all the way back up. Now there are additional options. If you'd like to set up a recurring meeting, this is a toggle here. And you can set up daily, weekly, and monthly recurrences. Now we won't be doing that here since we're just going to do a simple one, but I also want to point out no end date reservation. So as the administrator, you do have access to a no end date reservation, which is commonly used for permanently assigned spaces. Now end users will only have access to no end date reservations if you give them the right to do so. So we'll be going over user roles and rights next session, but just know that this is actually a right that you would have to give your end users if you'd like them to be able to permanently assign space to themselves. But for this demonstration, we're just going to do a simple hour and click apply. So you'll notice I have 3 blue buttons I can search for. We're going to first go to floor plan, then we'll take a look at calendar, and then we'll take a look at list. So floor plan is great because it's going to give you a visual view of where this particular asset is located. Calendar is really great when time matters more than space. And finally, the list view, which I always recommend to my new users to start with because it gives you the most information all at once. So I'm going to go ahead and search by floor plan. I can then select my floor from this list. And here I can see all the spaces that are going to be available to me given my time frame here from 3 to 4. So you'll also notice the red triangles. If a space is not available to me, it'll show up as a red triangle, and I can hover over to see that, oh, okay, John has that space. Or this one, I can see that this is my webinar reservation. So it will tell you in red if something is reserved. If it is unavailable, it will show up in gray. So for example, if we were outside operating hours. Now I'm going to select my space. I'd say this one looks pretty good because it's away from the main elevator. And if I hover over it, I can see an image. I can see what type of office it is, as well as the name. Now, if I click this, it's going to give me my reservation pop-up, which is a very quick way to make a reservation. At this point, all I would have to do is click submit. But I'm not going to do that because we want to go through all of these. But I can also click on the particular name to enter the detailed reservation screen, which gives me even more information about this particular asset. Next, I'm going to click Search by Calendar. where I can see time of spaces that are available. And to make a reservation, I can click on the time I'd like and click submit. Or again, I can click on the name to go into the most detailed reservation screen. I can also see in red when other things are reserved. So this view is great if time matters more. I know we're running a little short on time, so we'll just take a quick look at search by list, which is why, and you'll see immediately probably why I like this one so much. You can immediately see all the beautiful images you have set up, as well as the geographical location. I'd also like to point out as well that you can click on amenities and attributes, for example, and this is where users can filter by the amenities and attributes you might have set up. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on 10, which will bring me into my detailed reservation screen. And you can see our images here, so a user can know what they're getting into for the day. The user can see information such as about, where it is, and policies as mentioned, the different amenities and attributes offered. And once they're satisfied with the information they've found, they can click submit to make a reservation. And this will pop you back to the home page. And now I can see that here's my upcoming reservation, and I can choose to check in or cancel. So we'll just go ahead and check in. All right, so that's the end of our material today. We've covered locations and location configuration, the home page, assets and asset configuration. So the next thing that we'll be getting to is questions. All right, Vashonda, we're going to cover some questions.
Lisa, we've received quite a few questions. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. So the first question is, under upcoming reservations, can admins copy a reservation for another employee?
That's a really good question. So no, they won't be able to copy for another employee. If an administrator needs to book for another user, there is a workflow for that. So just to show you rather quickly, if you need to make reservations on behalf of another as an admin, you can go back to your settings page and you'll notice this cute little blue book button here. If you click on book, you as the admin will be able to book for yourself or someone else. You can choose for someone else, add the user you'd like to book for, Chauncey. And then you can decide if you'd like to use their permissions or your own, and click next. And you'll be taken to the reservations workflow where you can make a reservation for another user. Okay.
Thank you. Can categories be added for workspace and or collaboration space?
Another great question. So right now, our categories and types are canned, but if you do have a suggestion, please let us know what you'd like to see added in the future. We do collect this from all of our clients, and this influences what we add new later in a later release.
Thank you. On asset notifications, what level of permission should the person being notified have? For example, community manager, etc.
So this actually doesn't matter. So with notifications, you could actually have an end user notified. So it's up to you. If you have a manager that needs to be notified, they can be, or even if you have an end user who's maybe an intern and responsible for refilling snacks. So it really doesn't matter.
Thank you. When searching, is the numbering going to be fixed in how it goes from 1 to 10 correctly, then 2, 20 to 29, 3, 30 to 39, etc.?
Yes. So it's going to look at the first number, so 1, 12, 13, 14 as displayed here. So it will always go this way. Now, if you need a little bit more information on that, shoot us a quick email and we can give you some more detailed explanations as to how this is indexed as well.
Thank you. Is check-in still available on the day of, or is it limited to 15 minutes prior?
So it's day of. So if you have a reservation, for example, at 8 a.m. and you come into the office at 6 a.m., you would still be able to check in. So check-in is day of. You will not be able to check in the day prior, and you will not be able to check in the day after, obviously. And there are multiple ways to check in. So not only can you check in using the web interface, you can also check in using the mobile app, for example.
Thank you. What is an NED reservation best used for?
Great question. So an NED stands for no end date reservation. A no end date reservation is typically used for a permanently assigned space. So for example, if some of your users are permanently assigned, like a floor manager, maybe an executive assistant, and they always sit in the same space, it may make sense to create a no end date reservation. You can still require them to check into that reservation every day to track their utilization as well as utilization of that particular asset. And you can actually still let them be bumped out of the reservation and the space freed for someone else to use if you'd like to. But typically we'll see that used for things like floor managers, executive assistants, maybe that corner office where the CEO sits. I've even seen that used for a server closet and just tracking the utilization of that space. What it does is it's an ease of use item for the user because instead of having to create a reservation every day, it's there for all time.
Thank you. Can I set up a monthly recurring staff meeting in Forum?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So you would do that by coming to recurring, changing your recurring to monthly. You can have it, you have even more options here. So you could have it recur, for example, on the first weekday of every 6 months, for example. You can have it end after a number of occurrences or even end by a particular date. So this is really familiar if you've used Outlook, for example.
How can I turn off reservation confirmation emails?
Excellent question. So we're going to talk about preferences a little bit more next time, but let's go ahead and take a peek. So as a user, you have the ability to turn off and on notification emails that you receive from Forum. So every user has this ability, and it's one of the benefits of providing more autonomy to your users. So to edit your preferences, you would come to your profile, so you can see up here in the right-hand corner my name. And if I click this caret, I can go to my profile. Beneath my profile is the preference page. And here you can see all the possible notifications that I could receive from Forum. And I could decide if, for example, I don't want my update emails anymore that are sent to me. The user can just toggle to do not receive and save. And moving forward, they would no longer receive that notification email. Now, conversely, if they decide, you know what, I do want those emails again, I miss them, they can come back into their profile, switch to receive and save, and now they'll receive those emails again. So if you don't want particular notifications, come to your profile, to preferences, and just toggle to do not receive.
Thanks, Lisa. I think we have time for maybe one more. What
Sure.
automated notifications are sent to the end user when a space is secured?
So you will get a reservation confirmation email here. So after you create a reservation, a confirmation email will be sent to your inbox. Let me just see if I have one on hand I can show you quickly. Okay, so here's a confirmation email. So as you can see, I created a reservation, and this gives me more information about this particular space. Here I can see what particular space was reserved. I can see that it's awaiting check-in, and I can see where it's located. The floor plan will also be below here. Let me see if I have another example of a reservation creation. So here's another reservation creation. So I can see the confirmation email, and below this, I'll be able to see venue details. So that'll be automatically generated for the user. Alrighty, I think that is good. Now, if anybody has any additional questions, please don't hesitate to send us an email and let us know. So what we'll be doing next is next week we have session part 2 that'll be taking place. And that is going to cover groups and permissions, users, the general tab, as well as the data management utility. I really appreciate everybody joining today and participating in our first administrative walkthrough webinar. We'll be continuing to do these over the next few weeks. And please keep your eye out for our newsletter, as we'll also be including different topics that you'll be able to participate in that are not just pertaining to the admin walkthrough. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email project managers at agilequest.com. You can also email support@agilequest.com for any questions. A follow-up email will be generated for you as well, just as a reminder to get in contact with us, as well as how you can register for part 2 of this session. All right, well, I appreciate everybody's attention today, and I hope that you all have a great afternoon. Thank you.